Hi everyone, this is Sthembiso Matenjwa, and today we're going to be talking about advancing social change. This is going to be a prelude to what we're going to do in our intermediate course, where we're going to have an entire subject based on social justice. But I want you guys to understand the foundations of this before we kind of delve more deeply into some of the information that it presents. In terms of what we're going to be covering today, I'm going to do a brief introduction about what advancing social justice is about. Then we're going to look at the different stances on social change, then the different types of policies for social change. I think you might have already covered this in the introduction to government. Then we're going to try and shed some light on a few minority groups and their experiences. Then there are a few practice motions for you at the end that you can kind of use to see how well you've understood the content in this video. So, in terms of understanding what advancing social change is about. So, 500 years ago, society looked very different to how it looks now. This is partially due to the kind of technological evolution that we've had, but also a very clear social evolution and a moral evolution. This is because humanity itself is predicated on the idea of striving towards a utopia. Sorry if there's background noise, I think there's construction going on as well. But society is predicated on the idea of searching for and trying to attain a specific utopia. So we want to get better and better, and part of that is evolving in our morality and consistently questioning the way that we treat each other and we approach each other, which is the foundation of social justice, basically. So, what it meant to be a woman in the early 1900s to what it means to be a woman now is a completely different thing. On a definition basis, it is genuinely a completely different thing, but also the place that women have in society is completely different now as to what it was then. We're going to look at the various factors and the ways that this evolution of society kind of happens. The first thing we're going to kind of look at are the different stances on social change. So there are different perspectives on how we should bring about social change. And we're going to look at two of them. I have, two major ones. We're going to look at a majoritarian view, and then we're going to look at a pluralist view. This very much relates to the role that governments should also play in creating a lot of the social change that we want. The first one, which is the majoritarian view, suggests that the interest of the majority should determine government policy. So, in order for there to be any change or for anything to be adopted, the majority has to agree to it. Now, I want to create this clarity because I think there's a bit of confusion in the debating community with respect to with respect to the majoritarian view and how it works. So, the majoritarian view doesn't suggest that we do things that only benefit the majority, but instead it suggests that in order for social change to happen, the majority has to agree with it. So, in order for the interests of marginalized communities to be advanced, the majority has to agree that those marginalized communities have to be protected. So, the idea behind this is slavery can end in the USA under the majoritarian view. But in order for it to happen, the majority of people in the USA have to agree that slavery is a bad thing. So, in the absence of convincing the majority, this argues that the government or the state should not do anything that could change or advance a society. There's something inextricably different between the majoritarian view and the pluralist view. This is, as you might have noticed, I'm doing like little movie references when I within the last two slides. The previous one was from Moonlight. This is from Little Women. So the pluralist view suggests that the government should actively protect disenfranchised groups. So rather than bowing to the word of the majority, the government should protect the minority interest and they should care about the minority. So a lot of the information that I'm also presenting you with is taken directly from the African Voice 2012 debate guide. So what they are suggesting here is that our governments should actively care about the minority and should do whatever is necessary to protect those disenfranchised groups, even if the majority doesn't agree with that. It works on the idea that there are universal rights that people should have, and we shouldn't infringe on those universal rights, irrespective of the number of people who agree or disagree with that suggestion. All right. Now that we understand the types or the different stances people can have on how to bring about social change, we need to have a small conversation around the types of policies for bringing about social change. And there are three main ones. There's formal equality, there's substantive equality, and there's self-determination. Right. So formal equality. This view suggests that the government should only do something, or the government has an obligation to make sure that the laws don't discriminate against marginalized groups. So they have the right, or they have the obligation to make sure that the law treats everyone equally. So that is, formally speaking, everyone should be treated equally according to the law, irrespective of what the outcome is. So formal equality suggests that formally, if everyone is given the same rights and the same law, that is when the government's intervention on changing society stops, basically. And there shouldn't be anything beyond just making sure that the laws are set up to treat everyone equally. This is in stark contrast to something like substantive equality. Substantive equality suggests that the idea of just being equal to the law is not enough. Because even if you are equal in the eyes of the law, there are different disparities that people face, and there are different disparities in how people are able to access and make use of the law. So, for example, there's nothing in the US Constitution that suggests that black people are not equal to white people with respect to how justice should be enacted. However, there's a disproportionate arresting and imprisonment of black people as opposed to white people. So these disparities in how people are able to access and interact with the law are what substantive equality aims to address. It suggests that the government is legitimate in discriminating in their policies if the outcome is going to lead to equality, or if the outcome is going to lead to uplifting marginalized groups. So, for example, something like affirmative action policies, where people who are previously disadvantaged are given preference, are designed for the outcome of equality. So, even though formally we are treating them differently, so there's a formal sense of discrimination, the outcome is for equality. The reason why that discrimination is there is because, in the absence of creating that discrimination, the group that already has resources to access and utilize the law properly would be the only people that benefit from them. So the only people that benefit from jobs being equal for everyone would likely be the white, wealthier people, because they are the ones who are more likely to be the most educated, because they have the financial resources to go to the best schools and afford tutors. So without creating a means to uplift the marginalized group, we're going to be stuck in a situation where we consistently only have one type of person that's able to access the formal equality that's created. So we create a form of substantive equality to make sure that the marginalized people are able to receive the outcome of equality, which I also think is a pretty interesting topic. Yeah. Then there's self determination, which is a bit different. Self determination suggests that the way in which we should fix or address problems faced by marginalized people or marginalized communities is by giving them the right to self determine, giving them the right to create their own reality, giving them the right to govern themselves, and the right to create their own form of equality. So the example we have here is Sharia law, which is a separate legal system. And another one would kind of be, I'm not sure if I'm remembering this correctly, something that Malcolm X might have alluded to at some point in time, which is creating a separate state for black people so that they can be self-determining and self-governing in the United States of America. That's another concept that I think is incredibly interesting. So that's also something that is under the idea of self-determination. There's no clear idea on what the best form of advancing social change is, whether it's formal, substantive, or self-determination. um, there are different ways to bring about addressing marginalized communities. In my opinion, right, I don't have to be correct, but in my opinion, I think the best way to do it is a combination of all of these three. But that's something that you can think about yourself as well. Now that some of the theory is out of the way, we can look at a few of the marginalized communities and the kind of history that they have. I'm not going to go into too much detail with this because again, when we do our social justice subjects in our intermediate course, we're going to spend a lot more time kind of discussing each of these marginalized communities. But what I want you to come across here before we even discuss it is this concept of intersectionality. Intersectionality is understanding that marginalized groups don't exist in isolation and forms of oppression as a consequence don't exist in isolation. So you can be a woman and be black, which means that you will face a greater degree of discrimination than if you were just black, i.e., a black man, or just a woman, i.e., a white woman like Greta Gerwig, who I'm a massive fan of. But the point there is that discrimination, when there's intersectionality of different marginalized groups and marginalized identity, becomes a lot more complex for you to understand and a lot more complex for you to work with. It's not for the purpose of creating a hierarchy for who's most oppressed and who's least oppressed, but the point is to understand the form of oppression that you would go through if you have an overlap of different marginalized identities, which I think is the case for majority of people in society in modern times. You could be a black woman who is part of the LGBTQIA plus community, which is different forms of marginalization intersecting with each other. We're going to go through that in a bit more detail when we have greater discussions. This is just for you to have a broad kind of understanding of how social change is created. The first community we're discussing here is women, right? So women have historically faced systemic oppression and discrimination in many societies, with limited access to education, employment, and a wide variety of other things. So their form of discrimination is something that has um, been slowly progressing in terms of in terms of redress. So they gained the right of suffrage, I believe, in the United Kingdom in the 1920s, I believe. Yeah, due to the suffrage and suffragettes movements, I thought that was interesting. Interesting concept. When you go to the substantive equality slide, the lady that's there, her name is Emmeline Pankhurst. She was one of the leaders of the suffrage movement during the 1920s. And the lady that we have here is absolutely amazing author, Bell Hooks, also someone who speaks very clearly about intersectionality, but also the struggles faced by women. So there has been some redress in the way that women are treated, but there's still a long way to go. We are living in the gender-based violence capital of the world in South Africa. So there's clearly a lot of work that we need to do in addressing some of the issues that are faced by women. Then we speak about people of color, so specifically black and indigenous marginalized communities. So they've endured a lot of oppression due to slavery and colonization, which are things that I think you guys would have some level of understanding. I think by virtue of the fact that I'm sitting on the screen and I'm talking to you today and I'm able to hold a relative degree of power is important because it means that there has been some level of improvement in how black people have been treated in the past as opposed to now. But the lady that you have in the image who's holding up the Black Lives Matter poster is important because it shows that even in 2020, we had the biggest civil rights movement of all time, showing that there's still a lot that needs to happen for black people and people of color to receive the kind of treatment that they deserve. Then there is the LGBTQIA plus community, which I think is a also a very interesting and important community for us to discuss. I think there's they have a very rich history, which again I can't wait for you guys to kind of delve into it and learn a lot more about it. But there's always been laws surrounding gay marriage and essentially making it illegal for people of the same sex to be married. um, there have been laws around the transgender community as well, and I want to say that we've made a lot of progress in that respect. But it's difficult to say that we've made a lot of progress in that respect when we're still living in a continent where there are countries where it is illegal for you to to be gay, for example. So I think that there's still a lot more work that has to be done. I think there's a lot of work that has to be done with respect to addressing the mental health conversation around members of the LGBTQIA plus community and their ability to access those resources. There are clear disparities there uh, that I think aren't researched as much. And there's still conservative groups, for example, in the United States of America, that are interested in finding ways to outlaw same sex marriage. So I think these are, again, another community that's incredibly important for us to learn more about. Then there is the special needs community, which I'm happy with the degree to which we are spending time on understanding the evolution of the community, because even the terminology that we used to use referring to them as disabled individuals is terminology that we're starting to move away from. So there's definitely growth in that department as well. There are also bigger conversations around making facilities, buildings, and just general public spaces more accessible towards people with different needs and different abilities. So I think there is progress being made. Like I always say, though, still a lot of work that still needs to be done. So, like I was saying earlier, it's entirely possible for there to be an intersection of these different groups in society. You could be an individual with special needs and be a person of color and be an individual who falls within the LGBTQIA plus community, which means that the problems that you would face are very different and very nuanced to someone who may not have that identity. So, social change, social justice, and identity politics is a very complex thing, right? And it's not enough for us to rhetoric our way out of it. We have to place a greater emphasis on trying to understand the nuances behind a lot of these identities. All right. And then I have a couple of motions that you guys can use to practice and kind of unpack the move and unpack the concepts behind it. So please feel free to try and practice some of these and let us know what you think about them. And I hope this video has been helpful towards you. Thank you everyone for making it this far into the video. We hope that the information was valuable to you, and we hope that our course continues to enrich your debating career. Everyone who works at After Freedom does so by volunteering their time, absolutely free of charge. We are also dedicated to providing you with this information with no charge. If you would like to donate to After Freedom so that we can keep these operations running and so that we can get more people involved, please do see the details in the description. It would be really, really helpful to us so that we can continue helping you and the broader community. But with that being said, thank you very much, and we cannot wait to see you next week again.